most troubling scientific experiments. Science uses experimentation to develop new knowledge that allows humanity to evolve. Unfortunately, things don't always go well. Here are some examples of scientific missteps that teach us a lesson in ethics. 1. Triplets separated for science. Determining what development is innate versus acquired, nature versus nurture, has always fascinated researchers. As they share the same genetic makeup, twins have been the subject of many studies in this area. But it's difficult to understand how triplets could be separated at birth without their adoptive parents knowing, for the sole goal of being analyzed by a psychoanalyst with dubious ethics. This is what happened to Bobby Shafran, Eddie Galland, and David Kellman, three brothers who were the subject of a study in the 1960s by Dr. Peter Neubauer. The three brothers met by chance at university 19 years later. One of them, Eddie Galland, took his own life. The story of this experiment is told in the documentary Three Identical Strangers. 2. The Milgram Experiment. At the beginning of the 1960s, the American psychologist Stanley Milgram undertook a study where he told volunteer participants to give electric shocks to students who were actually actors. The volunteers were led to believe that they were testing learning methods, but in reality, the study was testing the volunteers' degree of willingness to follow an order that was contrary to their morality. Told to memorize a list of words and then recite them, the students were given an electric shock by the volunteers when they made an error, with the shocks increasing in magnitude for each wrong answer. If a volunteer hesitated in giving the shock, the experimenter would prod them to complete the experiment with increasing forcefulness. The result of the study was troubling. 62.5% of the volunteers completed the experiment, meaning they administered all the levels of shocks up to 450 volts after being prompted by the experimenter. Number 3. The Stanford Prison Experiment. In 1971, the American psychologist Philip Zimbardo wanted to demonstrate that certain social situations can induce behaviors that go against an individual's personal values, especially in a prison environment. 18 subjects were selected and randomly separated into two categories: prisoners and guards. The subjects in the study quickly adapted to their roles, and the guards developed authoritarian behaviors, despite nothing justifying their position of authority. The prisoners, on the other hand, accepted the cruel treatment, despite being allowed to leave the study at any time. This study inspired the 2015 film, The Stanford Prison Experiment. 4. The Push. Did mentalist Darren Brown go too far in trying to prove that he could convince someone to commit murder? Can social pressure actually push someone to commit murder? That's the premise of the reality TV show The Push, released in February 2018 on Netflix. In the show, 70 actors took part in an extremely elaborate setup to convince the subject to push a man off a building. The show focuses on Chris, a young, ordinary man who experiences a descent into hell. Will he go all the way? The experiment is so horrible it's a wonder the subject hasn't filed a lawsuit. Number 5. Nazi experiments. During the Holocaust, Dr. Josef Mengele conducted cruel experiments on Jewish prisoners, in particular on twins, with the goal of demonstrating the importance of heredity, thereby confirming the Nazi preoccupation with the superiority of the Aryan race. Nicknamed the Angel of Death, Mengele mistreated his subjects, and many of them died during the experiments that included amputations and the intentional injection of diseases. Adopted after the war, the Nuremberg Code now outlines acceptable practices for medical experimentation. The Nazi executioner escaped justice and died in 1979 in Brazil.